Good evening, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, dear students, dear colleagues, distinguished guests. In this evening, it's very important one for West University of Timișoara and for entire Timișoara community. In 2023, if you remember, Timișoara was the European capital of the culture. And the motto of this event, it was lighting up your city. And we're thinking here at the West University of Timișoara how we can be involved in this project. And our idea, it was to bring here in this wonderful aula brilliant minds, great personality, great person who can change the many ideas, who can change even the world and way of thinking of the new generation. And we invite that concept, Nobles at UVT. We promised then we will bring 3 Nobel Prize winners. What wasn't that? Because in that year, we invited here in this aula 7 Nobel Prize winners. It was wonderful. So many domains, different domains. But now, we are living in the very hard times. And we all need peace. That's why tonight, here, we have Nobel Prize winner from Peace 2022, Oleksandra Matviichuk. Thank you very much, Oleksandra. This conference will be a dialogue, will be a debate and conversation. And that's why we invite here one of the greatest Romanian journalists. You know, BU TV show, Sabina Iosub. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pretty sure we'll have a very nice and pleasant evening. Girls, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and please, let's start with a big round of applause for this university that had this magnificent idea of having Nobel Prize winners in contact, in dialogue with you. Today we have Oleksandra, but please, a round of applause for the West University of Timișoara. It's such an honor for me to be here and to have this conversation with Oleksandra. We've met yesterday, Oleksandra, and I've seen in the airport your blue eyes, and I thought, looking at you, that maybe you are a beautiful lady but a fragile person. But reading about you, understanding what you've done, looking at how you are talking now about what's happening in your country, knowing, for example, that yesterday the bombs were near your apartment, near your family, your husband, makes me speak differently to you. You are an inspiration, and we'll start from here. Where do you find power in yourself?
First of all, it's an honor for me to be here and to address to this distinguished audience. I'm very grateful for university to invite me and to organize this beautiful event. I will tell you my personal story. When I was a child, studying in school, I got acquaintance with Soviet dissidents. And suddenly, I appeared in a circle of fantastic people, People who say what they think and do what they say. It sounds simple, but not very widespread, unfortunately. People who had bravery to stood up their voice against the entire totalitarian Soviet machine. People who were severely repressed. Part of dissidents were killed, part of them were jailed, part of them were locked for forcible psychological treatment, but they didn't give up. So, being a child in a school, I was so inspired by this example that I decided myself that I will study law and I will continue this fight for freedom and for human dignity. That is how I became human rights lawyer.
And what does actually human dignity mean in practical terms for people having or living actually under occupation, bombardment, forced displacement?
It's a driving force. It's an answer why we still resist. 5 years ago, I was in Kiev when large-scale war started. I refused to evacuate, and with a part of my team, we continued our work on the ground. It was a very dangerous time because Russians tried to circle my city, and I remember that we celebrated every morning like a victory, just because we managed to stand for one more night. I also remember how international organizations evacuated their personnel, because not just Putin, but also international partners were confident that Ukraine has no potential to resist to such enormous opposing power, so they left us alone. But ordinary people remained, and ordinary people started to do extraordinary things. It were ordinary people who helped to survive under artillery's fire. It were ordinary people who took people out from the ruined cities. It were ordinary people who broke through the encirclement to provide humanitarian aid. And suddenly, it became obvious that ordinary people fighting for their freedom and human dignity are stronger than even the second army in the world.
I was looking at Romanians in the beginning of the war in Ukraine, and it was them, the ordinary people, who helped the ordinary people in your country from soul to soul, from family to family. And we've discussed about this subject earlier in a podcast that all of you will see on the site of the university, but also in the press conference. And every time you were talking about what Romanians did for Ukrainians, you have tears in your eyes.
Because we survived because of you. It just passed of the truth that millions of people in Ukraine told, we don't care that Russia, such enormous opposing power, that Russia has veto in UN, nuclear weapon, strong military potential, oil and gas, that means a lot of money, 140 million population. We will fight for the slightest chance for our children to live without fear of violence and to have a future and long-term perspective. It's true, but just partially. The second part of this picture, it were ordinary people in Romania, in France, in Switzerland, in United States, in Kenya, in Brazil, who were with us in this dramatic time of our history, when ordinary people told that their governments must do something in this regard to help Ukraine to resist. And I know hundreds and hundreds of stories how ordinary people in Romania, in other countries, they start to inform what's going on in Ukraine. They host Ukrainian refugees. They collect money for different humanitarian purpose. They came to volunteer directly. They do a lot. And that's why I'm still in tears, because It's obvious for me that we survived because of your assistance, your help, that you weren't indifferent, and I feel a huge gratitude. Thank you.
Now imagine that Oleksandra is looking at horrible images. She's looking at all the war crimes that are happening in her country. You have documented war crimes and human rights abuses since the beginning of the invasion. You were there on the field, you were discussing with the families of persons who died in terrible circumstances. You've seen things that cannot be unseen. How do you continue this work emotionally, knowing that behind every testimony there is immense human suffering?
It's not easy work, frankly speaking, because we face with enormous amount of crimes. Russia uses war crimes as the methods of warfare. So Russia deliberately inflicting the immense pain and suffering to Ukrainian civilians. It's a way how Russia tries to break people's resistance and occupy the country, and it's tough. Even being professional lawyers, it's tough to deal with human pain on a daily basis. Let me illustrate it, just one story from our database. This is a story of 10-year-old boy Andriy from city Brovary near Kiev. When large-scale war started, his family did what every family would do in such situations. They took their son, some hastily gathering belongings, some documents, to drive by car far away from this danger. But unfortunately, they faced with a line of Russian tanks, and armored personal carrier, just for fun, hit civilian car and ran over civilian car. Andriy told that it seemed that his father has already died, but his mother, she was alive because they sit together in a back seat, and his mother spoke to him. Next second, someone took the boy and through the window and pulled him on the road, and next second, Russians fired to the gas tank of the civilian car. So you can imagine what happened. This 10-year-old boy told to my colleague how his mother burned alive in this car on his own eyes. This is example of story that we are documented. It's more than 100,000 in our database, and you can't get used to it, even being professional lawyers, because first and foremost, we're all human beings. But what helps me? I work with people who literally have gone through hell. And I know that these people need to restore not just their broken lives, broken families, broken vision of the future, but also their broken beliefs that justice is possible, even though delayed in time. Because they told us stories that they can't share even with their beloved ones, because they're afraid to harm them. It's a huge responsibility. And I'm glad to share with you that we had a huge success in our fight for justice. Just a week ago, in Chisinau, during the regular session of Committee of Ministers of Council of Europe, 36 countries plus European Union joined to special tribunal on aggression. It's a huge success. I remember when I started this advocacy in May 2022, when I first time left the country, Even those who was sympathetic to our struggle told that it's impossible. And here we are. We has launched it.
Can memory itself become a form of resistance, especially when the aggressor tries actually to erase identity, culture, history, etc.? You've told me yesterday that part of the culture in Kiev was vanished by yesterday bombings, one of the buildings that you've admired a lot.
Yes, it's true. Even Kiev National Opera was damaged. It was deliberate attack against cultural heritage in my city. But this is a very clear example of what Russians are doing. Putin openly says there is no Ukrainian language, there is no Ukrainian culture, there is no Ukrainian nation. For 12 years, we have been documenting how these words converted in horrible practice in occupied territories. Russia occupied 20% of Ukrainian territories, including Crimea, and Russians physically exterminate active local people there. Mayors, journalists, children writers, teachers, priests, environmentalists. They ban Ukrainian language and culture. They destroyed and robbed Ukrainian cultural heritage. And when they take Ukrainian children, probably you heard that they have taken dozens of thousands Ukrainian children to Russia. They put them in Russian education camps. They told them, you're not Ukrainian, you're Russian children, your families, your parents refused from you, and you will be adopted by Russian families who will bring you up as Russians. Let me illustrate it with a story of children's writer Volodymyr Vakulenko. He wrote beautiful stories for Ukrainian children, and entire generation of Ukrainian children brought up on his Daddy's book. During Russian occupation, he disappeared. I know his family. His family hoped to the last that he's alive, but like dozens of thousands of Ukrainian civilians are illegally kept in Russian captivity. But when Ukrainian army liberated Kharkiv region, we found mass grave in forest near city Izum. And in this mass grave, we found dead bodies of civilians, men, women, with the horrible signs of torture, with the hands tied under their back. And in unmarked grave with the number 319, we found dead body of this children's writer, Volodymyr Vakulenko. And you can ask me, why Russians killed children's writer? What is the reason? The answer is simple, because they could. Because this is what Russian occupation is about. And that is why we literally have no choice, because if we stop resistance and Russia will occupy the whole country, we will cease to exist. We will vanish like a nation.
If we are looking at what Putin is saying or Russians are saying, nothing that you are telling is truth. Everything is a lie. Everything is made in a laboratory or so. How can you fight such a fake news, such type of manipulation and disinformation?
Not easy question to answer. I know that people start to understand that the war is going on only when bombs fell on their heads. But war has not just military, but also informational dimension. And this is a battle for your hearts and minds. This battle has no limitation in national borders. This battle has already crossed the borders of Romania. And modern authoritarian regimes, they have no common ideology, but they promote common narratives. They attack truth. They try to destroy trust between people and society. and they damage their link with reality. It's a general problem. We live with rapid development of new technologies, where people spend more and more time in digital reality. I always have a joke that before we was human beings, now we human beings with a smartphone. Always have it on the table. So this digital reality is overloaded with fake, disinformation, and propaganda. And it's ruined our link with reality as such, because we start to lose our ability to make a distinguish between lie and truth. And that is why it's a general problem, not just for society in a war, because now even people from the same small community, they have no more a shared picture of reality. Without a shared picture of reality, these people can't do common actions. Without common actions, how these people can protect their freedom, their democracy, or respond to the global challenges? I think that in such situation, it's our civil duty to protect truth. We can't transfer this responsibility to human rights lawyers or to politicians or to experts or to journalists. It's our civil duty. Let me finish with a very personal story for me. It's a story of my friend. She was a famous Ukrainian journalist. She was young, talented. She received several international awards. And she was unbelievably brave, much braver than me. She decided that it is her journalist obligation to come to occupied territories. She originally from this part of the country, to tell about torture, sexual violence, and killings, about this terror that Russia imposed against Ukrainians in occupation. And she disappeared. Her name was Victoria Roshina. Now we know that she was abducted by herself. She was severely tortured, and she was secretly transported to Russia, where she, being a journalist, was held without any official charges. We also know that she didn't receive the medical care, and according to the words of her cellmate, her weight was approximately 30 kilograms. But we still have no idea how she died, because Russians refused to return her body to the grieving parents for 6 months. And when Russians returned her body, we found a body of our friend and colleague with the horrible signs of torture, and several internal organs were missing: eyes, brain, and part of trachea. And I tell this story for a reason. My colleague, Victoria Roshina, risked her life to tell a truth, what Russia is doing with people in occupation, because she believed that truth mattered. She believed that facts matter, that when we restore our link with reality, it's lead us to the right decisions and right actions as international community. And just with doing her job, she can save thousands, thousands, and thousands of lives. And you know what? Despite this horrible tragedy, I still don't think that Vika was naive. I also do believe that truth matters.
I was about to ask what was the story that put a sign on your soul, but you already told us that. What was the image that you cannot forget?
city, my native city, Kiev, was very empty in first months of large-scale war. I had never seen my city like this, and I had never think that I love my city so much, while I face the real threat that my city and my home can gone. And we spent under the threat to be occupied February, March, and the end of March, Ukrainian army managed to push Russians from the Kiev region. And we immediately sent mobile groups to Bucha, to Matviichuk, to Vorzel, to Irpin, to other cities and settlements. And we were shocked. While we know what's going on there because we got information, it's a huge difference between knowing what's going on and experience what's going on. We were shocked because we found dead bodies of civilians who lay scattered around the streets until their liberation. We found dead bodies of civilians in the gardens of their own households, in their homes. We found dead bodies of civilians in mass graves. We found dead bodies of civilians, the whole families with children, in civilian cars who were deliberately shooting while they're just trying to escape. So this was real horror. And those of us who were that time on that places, we will never forget the smell. But the image which came to my mind when I started to think about your question is different. It's April 2022. I returning home, and suddenly I noticed children who playing with a ball in the yard. Children who just playing, smiling, laughing, chatting. And I cried because I haven't seen children in my city, Kiev, who previously had millions of people for 2 months. And it was no guarantee for me that the children will return back.
Such an image gives you hope, or what gives you hope nowadays?
I'm a very hopeful person, and I look in future with optimism. It's obvious. I spent in human rights fields 12 years, and I live not in Switzerland, I live in Ukraine. So you have to be optimistic to do human rights work for 12 years in Ukraine, because just 12 years ago, we lived under authoritarian, pro-Russian, corrupt regime of President Yanukovych. And last 12 years, we live in the war, which probably the most horrible thing which just can happen in the human life. So I think that pessimism is a luxury that we can't afford ourselves. But returning to the hope, I think there is a huge difference between to be hopeful person and to be wishful thinking person. Because what does it mean, wishful thinking? It's a theory in the mind of some people that sooner or later everything will be fine. That you can do nothing, the history miraculously will move in the right direction. I don't believe in it. I think that without our efforts, history can go in the wrong direction. Hope means difference. Hope, it's a cognitive strategy. In Ukrainian language, hope translated as nadia, and dia in Ukrainian language means action. Hope, it's not a confidence that everything will be fine. Hope, it's a deep understanding that all our efforts have a huge meaning.
Europe is once again confronted with war, with fear, instability. What lessons should democratic societies learn from Ukraine's experience?
That we must defend our values. It's a very simple lesson, but very important. We are losing freedom in the world. 80% of people in the world live in non-free or partially free societies. This means that people who have a real right to vote for whom they want to vote, who have a real right to say what they want to say, who have a real right to love whatever their heart tells them to love, these people are minority. And the problem is not just in fact that in authoritarian countries, the space for freedom is shrinking to the size of the prison cell. The problem is that in developed democracies, like countries of European Union, people start to put into questions the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There are reasons for this. The current generations in countries of European Union, they inherited their freedom from their grandparents. They have never fought for them. They don't understand the value of human rights. They became consumers of democracy. They start to take democracy for granted. They consider freedom as a possibility to make a choice between different cheeses in supermarket. This is what freedom means for people. And that is why, when elections are coming, these people start to easily exchange their freedom for populist claim, for videos from TikTok, from economic benefits, from illusion of security, and first and foremost, for their own comfort. But freedom, human rights, democracy are very fragile. We can't attain these values once and forever. We make our own choice every day. And probably in peaceful time, we can't afford not to be active to defend freedom and democracy. But I'm sorry to say you, open your eyes. We are not living in a peaceful times anymore. We are living in time of global turbulence, when the world order based in UN Charter and international law has collapsed and changes new norm. And only readiness to defend our freedom and our democracy defines society that will have future.
In many countries, we can observe growing polarization, distrust in democratic institutions. Are you optimistic about the future of democracy in Europe, taking all this into account?
I think that someone who finds a way how to deal with this fragmentation of European and other societies properly will receive a Nobel Peace Prize. I'm sure, because it's a very difficult question. Probably you know from the scientists that lie spread in social networks 6 times faster than truth. And it has done deliberate, because very often lies have some emotional connotation. And algorithms of social networks and the owners of the big techs who are behind these algorithms, they think only about their profits. And they don't care that we destroyed our link with reality, that we create echo chambers, that we can't communicate with people with different points of view, that we become fragmented. They don't care about this. Also, there is a problem that, as I mentioned before, it's a 4th generation in European countries who inherited their freedom from their grandparents. And this means that you have no idea what does it mean to live under authoritarian ruler. And people have legitimate right to criticize democracy, because democracy is not ideal. There are a lot of problems which still exist, for example, social inequality. But what people forget, that authoritarian regimes don't solve these problems either. The only difference is that people in authoritarian countries have no right to complain. And I think it was a huge mistake of our previous generations who decided that after the fall of Berlin Wall and collapse of Soviet Union, democracy is a final answer. We have to promote democracy. We have to explain people in our countries that we have to do two tasks parallel. The first task, to protect our democracy. The second task, to perfect our democracy. Because even our non-perfect democracy means a lot. The alternative to our non-perfect democracy, it's a hell of authoritarian regime.
Just a quick reminder for you that you can send your questions, and we will go in short time over these questions. I'm waiting them. You won a Nobel Prize, actually, for peace, continuing your parallel. How was that moment? You have to scan this QR code for questions, and I will receive them on the tablet, and I will go through them. So how was that moment, receiving a Nobel Prize for peace during the worst moment for your country?
I will share how it happened. I was in a travel back home from the conference in United States. And probably you know that there is no functioning airport in my country since the large-scale war started. So it takes 2 days to leave the country and 2 days to return to the country. So I was on my way back, and I was going with my luggage to railway station in Warsaw to take my first train, and then I have to take second train, and then I will be in Kiev. And my colleagues called me and told, we won the Nobel Peace Prize. I answered, good joke, and stopped the phone because I was in a hurry to reach my train. And just in several seconds, I saw that my phone became red. And I understood, this is not a joke. Probably it's truth. And the first thought which came to my mind was, oh my God, I will miss my train. I will not be in Kiev tomorrow.
And did you stop?
No. I managed. It's not the most challenge, but let's be very honest. Sometimes people asked how my life was changed after the Nobel Peace Prize. And I very honestly answered that it's not Nobel Peace Prize that changed my life. The large-scale war changed my life completely. Large-scale war ruined everything that I call normal life for me, for millions of people in Ukraine. Because such simple things like a possibility to go to work, to meet with your friends in cafe, to have family dinners, to hug your beloved ones, disappeared and crushed for hundreds of pieces for millions of people in Ukraine. To live during the large-scale war means that you live in total uncertainty. You can't plan not just your day, you can't plan your next several hours. You have no idea what will happen in the next several hours. To live during the large-scale war means that you live in constant fear for your beloved ones, because there is no safe place in the whole country where you can hide from Russian rockets. And that is why when we go to bed, we have no idea whether or not we will get up next morning, because the war is a lottery. And probably it will be your residential building who will be hit this night. And that is why when we get up next morning, First, which we are doing, millions of people in Ukraine are doing these rituals. We just messaged our friends, relatives, we looked to the news what happened during this night. Because if your city hasn't been bombarded this night, it doesn't mean the city where your family or your parents or your friends live hasn't been bombarded this night. It's a very tough life, frankly speaking. But not to finish on pessimist mode. What I know from our example, that these dramatic times provide people a possibility to express the best in us, to be courageous, to fight for freedom, to make a difficult but right choices, to take burden of responsibility, and to help each other. I know so many stories when people risking their lives for others whom they never met before. And you know what? Only when you help in each other, only in that acute moment, you are aware what does it mean to be human. And frankly speaking, I want to forget a lot about this war. I don't want, when the war will finish, to hold these images or this knowledge or this pain inside me till the end of my life. But I want to remember for ages this very simple truth, that a lot of things that we found important in our life are not important. They're not important. There are only several things which have a real value, which have a real value to fight for them, to live for them, and unfortunately, as our example has shown, even to die for them.
Forget, but impossible to forgive, actually. From this point of view, how should future generations remember this period of European history?
I think I have to start with excuse for future generation that we, my generation I mean, will leave you such mess. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know how this story will end, because Putin started large-scale war not just to occupy one more part of Ukrainian land. Putin started large-scale war in order to occupy and destroy the whole Ukraine and move further. He sees Ukraine as a bridge to Europe. His logic is historical. He dreams about his legacy. He don't care about people, even in Russia, because human life is the cheapest resource for Russian empire. And Russia is empire. Empire has a center, but has no borders. Empire always tries to expand. This is the nature of empire. And this is not my words. I just quote Russian President Vladimir Putin, who told that borders of Russian empire never ends. So it means one very practical thing, that people in other European countries, you are safe only because Ukrainians are still resisting and don't let Russian army to move further and to attack your countries. And this changed the whole optics, because Ukraine is not just beneficiary of your support. Ukraine is a strong contributor, an integral part of your security.
Don't forget about the QR code and the questions. I'm waiting for them. And I think this discussion makes us look at the bigger picture. Do you believe that the war in Ukraine has also become a test for the moral and political future of the European Union itself?
I think this war is a huge test, not just for Europe, but for the future world order. Because while politicians start to repeat more and more often that current world order has collapsed, the question is how the new world order will look like. And Putin has his own vision, and that is why it's not just a war between two states, Russia and Ukraine. This is a war between two systems, between authoritarianism and democracy. And with this war, Putin attempts to convince the entire world that democracy, rule of law, human rights are fake values because they couldn't protect anyone during the war. Putin attempts to convince that country with a strong military potential, a nuclear weapon, can do whatever it wants, can invade in other countries, kill people there, erode their identity, steal their children, transfer them to Russians, and occupy their territories. If Putin succeeds, it will encourage other authoritarian leaders in different parts of the globe to do the same. If Putin succeeds, we'll have no stability here in Europe because it will change completely the basis for the new world order and what will be seen and recognized as acceptable behavior. I think that last year we made a huge step back to the past. I was shocked when I saw in UN General Assembly the result of votes where North Korea, Russia, Eritrea voted together with United States. I was shocked. What can be the similar between United States and North Korea? So I think we made a huge step back to the past, and let's be honest, this past wasn't great. Because while some leaders think that they will be beneficial in the world of strongest, and that's why they neglected rule of law, we know from the history that the world where you can't rely on rule of law, but this world governed only by will of strongest, it's a very fragile world. It's dangerous for everyone without any exceptions. For obvious reasons, for 90% of population in the world, because they have to obey to the will of strongest, but it's also dangerous for countries who think that they're big powers, because to be strongest, it's a process. It means that you have always to convince others that you are in the top of hierarchy of violence. This means that you have to send your citizens to fight in different parts of the globe and to prove it. And that is why we know from the history that the world where not rule of law but the will of strongest dominate, it's always the world of wars and mass violence. And now we approach into this. And while we made this step back last year, I do hope that it's not too late to change the course of the history.
What are you afraid of?
It's not about personal threat. Not because I'm the most courageous person in the world, no. I'm ordinary, I'm not hero. But I accepted the level of danger. 12 years ago, I launched civil initiative Euromaidan SOS during Revolution of Dignity. It was a response to the brutal dispersal of peaceful student demonstration, and we united thousands of people in Ukraine. We work 24 hours per day, and we provide legal assistance to all persecuted protesters in my country. And every day, hundreds and hundreds of people who were beaten, arrested, tortured, accused in fabricated criminal cases, passed through our care. So this revolution of dignity, which opened the path for Euro-integration, means for us a lot because we paid for this chance to do democratic reforms a very high price. And during this revolution of dignity, gangsters came to my flat, so I couldn't return home for months and a half. The Office of General Prosecutor started criminal investigation case against me, and now we live under constant Russian bombardment. Regardless what we are doing, you can be killed every night. So if you will be afraid of these circumstances, you will gone mad. Probably I have already gone, that's why I'm calm. But I think that I just acknowledge and accept this level of danger. I'm afraid that my country will make a wrong historical choice. And to conservate in position of victim. Legally, we are victim. We are victim of the crime of aggression, and I have just recently told you that we are proud that we made a first step to establish a special tribunal on aggression to hold Putin, Lukashenko, and top political leadership and high military command of the Russian state accountable, because this leadership decision to break the peace and to start this bloody war opened the path to hell. But we can't afford ourselves to conservate in position of victim. Because when you treat yourself as a victim, you transfer responsibility for rescuers. But I'm sorry, we live in non-ideal world. There are no rescuers. We are the rescuers for ourselves. So this is my threat, because when you feel yourself victim, you have a huge offense. An offense, it's a poison. It's a poison, and it's a transgenerational poison.
We have a very, very interesting questions from the audience. I will start the first one. Congratulations for your courage to tell the truth. I admire your work. I can see that what you do is very hard and painful. How do you think this war will end?
Not with Donald Trump peaceful negotiation, for sure. For obvious reason, because the goal of President Donald Trump is to sign agreement and to win a Nobel Peace Prize. This was a plan. The plan was brilliant, but it didn't work. Because probably President Donald Trump don't know that we have already signed 2 peace agreements with Russia. Because when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2014 and occupied Crimea and part of the eastern regions, Ukraine had a 0 chance to release its territories by military force. And that is why we signed 2 peace agreements, because we want to stop the war. And how Russia uses 8 years of so-called peace. Russia violated ceasefire almost daily. People were dying without any consequences for Russia. Russia transferred Crimea, the former resort, into powerful military base. Russia produced artillery shells, prepared the economy for the wave of sanctions, trained their troops, forcibly mobilized Ukrainian men from occupied territories to Russian army, and started large-scale war. So the goal of this peace negotiation is wrong. We don't need to sign third peace agreement to provide Russia a pause to retreat, to regroup, and to start large-scale war again. We want and we dream about sustainable peace. And the question is how to get it. There is no magic button, but there is a strategy. We must make the price for war for Putin higher than the price for peace. Because unfortunately, the war is still profitable for Russia and for Putin itself, because war provides excuse for all internal problems in Russia. War centralized Putin's power, and war became profitable for people in Russia. While majority of foreigners know Moscow and St. Petersburg, they don't understand that Russia pretends to be great, but Russia is very poor. The vast majority of people in Russia live in depressive regions, in unbelievable poverty. For them to join Russian army, it's an only existing social lift because they start to receive money that they can't even dream in their depressive regions. Even more, my Russian friends, human rights colleagues, told me that when this person will be killed in Ukraine, his family receive money that this concrete person would never earn even if he would work till the end of his life. Can you imagine? That's why the war became profitable for ordinary Russians. And our Russian human rights colleagues call this type of economy necronomy. Necronomy, because Russia sells death. So how to stop necronomy? No magic button, but it needs decisive actions to break the ability of Russian economy to feed this bloody war. Return to the past. When Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, Soviet families started to receive coffins, and it leads to the negative resonance in society and the withdrawal of Soviet army from Afghanistan. Putin studied these historical lessons well, and now when Russian families receive coffins from Ukraine, they also receive a lot of money, and that's why they are satisfied with everything. When we break the ability of Russian necronomy to feed this war with confiscation of Russian frozen assets, with arrest of Russian shadow fleet, with closing the back door that Russia used to bypass the sanctions, and all other things which your governments know, but we're still waiting for your governments to do, Russian families start to receive coffins without money. And this will change the whole dynamic. And the price for war, for Putin, will become higher than the price for peace. And that is how we can stop this bloody war.
Another question. First of all, thank you for everything that you are standing for. We hosted an Ukrainian family in our house at the beginning of the war and promised we would visit them when the war is over. What will be the first thing you plan to do when Ukraine will win the war?
Thank you that you're hosting Ukrainian family. It's very personal for probably majority part of Ukrainians because in 2022, every second family in Ukraine was separated. My mother is a refugee. She also had to leave everything which she has in a previous life and to run to another country, not because she wants to live in another country, but because she has no other choice. And she still can't return because it's difficult to live under constant bombardment. She tried, but in a week after her return, Russia sent dozens of ballistic missiles, and my mother had a heart attack. She told, I can't live like this. She packed her baggage and she returned back abroad. So thank you. It's a very personal thing. And thank you that you speak about Ukrainian victory. It's not a common spread narrative. And I think this is a problem. Because while 5 years ago, European Union told, let's help Ukraine not to fail, and we start to receive first weapons to be able to defend ourselves, first sanctions against Russia, real sanctions, were introduced into force. It's still probably for people don't understandable why we was waiting for a first modern tank for more than a year, why we was waiting for a first modern plane for more than 3 years, why we're still waiting for creation of special tribunal, for confiscation of Russian frozen assets, for receiving a long-range distance weapons, because it takes 42 seconds for Russian missiles to hit school in Kharkiv. And when you have 42 seconds and your children in this school, you have a clear understanding that your children have no time to go to bomb shelter, and probably in 42 seconds your children will be killed. And that's why we need this long-range distance weapon to stop these rockets in military battlefield in Russia. So we're still waiting for obvious reason, because it's a huge difference between let's help Ukraine not to fail and let's help Ukraine to win. You see the difference? It's huge. We can practically measure this difference in types of weapons, in speed of decisions, in gravity of sanctions. And the problem is, while European countries are still discussing whether or not they will take decisive actions, the time for us converted in numerous death. We dying. We dying every day in battlefield, in occupied territories, in deep rear. So that's why it's so important that you mentioned Ukrainian victory. It means that you believe in our victory. Thank you for this. And what I will do.
First thing.
I don't think that it will be a very joyful day for me, frankly speaking. It will sound ironically, but I will explain you. I had a mentor, the dissident that I mentioned in the beginning of our conversation. He was famous Ukrainian philosopher, writer, the former prisoner of Soviet Gulag. And he told me that when the Second World War was finished, they didn't celebrate. They didn't celebrate because all people remember and know about high price that they pay for this victory. Only now Russia pretend to be great and use this day and a slogan we can repeat to mobilize Russians for the next wars. But when the Second World War finished, people in Russia didn't celebrate. People in Ukraine didn't celebrate, and in other Soviet republic, because everyone remember about the price. So probably first, what I will do in day of victory, I will allow myself to take a pause and to remember and to be with my thoughts, with people whom I love and whom I lost in this war.
You've told me today when we were drinking coffee together that you miss those mornings, quiet mornings of just having a coffee with the family and just doing nothing, enjoying that coffee, in order to understand how the small things are actually extremely important in our lives. I was looking at the questions and trying to estimate how much time should we spend together in order to cover all the questions. I hope you have the next 2 days available. No, we will only have 15 minutes, so it won't be all the questions here, but I think you will receive them in order to see how people that are watching you for more than an hour now and listening to you feel about what you're doing, about your power, because a lot of them are underlying this area of resistance, actually. Let's see, another question. One regarding Romania. I've seen one regarding Romania here. What is the greatest risk you see for Romania and for the west part of Romania during these times?
I see the huge risk, not just for Romania, not just for Ukraine, not just for European Union, but for humanity, that we lost something very essential. Public intellectuals call this time as an era of post-truth. But I think that we live in an era of post-knowledge, because knowledge is losing their values. Because people, especially young people, they start to take as a model of behavior bloggers in Instagram. They fulfill their advices, their model, but not researchers, doctors, or scientists. And this is a trend. People in different countries demand for simple solutions. In our archi-complex world, it's not possible. And they don't care about it. And that's why they start to vote for populists who promise them everything which they just want to hear. And yes, you can treat your runny nose, if you get cold, with the jumps. You can do it. Sooner or later, you will be okay, even without any treatment. And with the jumps, it will not harm your body. Probably even made you more athletics. But if you have oncology, and you will treat oncology with the jumps, the price of delay of actual therapy, it will be very high. And I see the current trend worldwide to simplification, let's say to primitivization. People don't want to hear long explanations. They don't want to read long texts. They don't want to listen difficult materials or complex information. They need simple answers. And they open social networks. They have no questions, but they have already found answers in these social networks. And I don't know what will be with such kind of way of thinking. And that is why I think it's our task to contradict this trend to simplification with opposite trend, a trend to think in a complex way, to understand that we are very interconnected, that we have to find difficult answers to the difficult questions, and to be responsible.
Do we have students here from law faculty? Because, okay, a lot of you, and I think this question should be very important for you. What can a law faculty do in order to encourage students to get more involved in human rights activism and democracy activism in general?
Good question. I think that first and foremost, we teach who we are. And that is why we have to rethink what education has provided to people. Because another trend that I observe, we lose humanity. And it's not the first time in our history when we see that human dimension disappeared from the politics. Human dimension disappeared from the field of new technologies. Human dimension disappeared from all other fields. I always remember that concentration camps, I mean gas chambers there, were built by very educated and qualified German engineers. So that's why, not just for legal faculty, but for all other faculties, we must ingrain as a part of education this humanistic, human way of thinking, human values. This is important. And when while the question was about legal faculty, I think for legal faculty you can do it much easier because you can start from the first class to provide pro bono help for people, for your community, just to be a part of change that you want to see in your community. This is what I can recommend, but I'm not the smartest person in the room. I sit on the stage, but it doesn't mean that I'm the smartest. And I believe in youth. I was a youth leader my time. I was a head of student parliament, then I created all Ukrainian youth organizations, so I know that youth very often can find solution out of box that we adults even can't imagine. Just do something. This is my main advice and this is my main request. Just do something. We need your involvement.
It will be the last question. What is the hardest truth you have learned about people during the struggle for peace?
When I was a child, I looked to the world through the prism that every human being has this internal desire to be free. And I still believe in it. But what I understand, based on my experience, that parallel to this, every human being has a desire to avoid responsibility. In 1941, the famous German psychologist Erich Fromm wrote a book. In 1941, he decided to analyze how it can happen that his own society, with such level of development of culture and law, could grow to such level of barbarism. And he invented 4 mechanisms, psychological mechanisms, how people deprived of their own responsibility. And unfortunately, I think that this work is still actual, because we have a lot of countries with a huge population, but a few number of citizens. There is a difference between population and citizens. Population don't care about politics, they don't care about social problems. They think in a way, I'm an ordinary people, what we can do, government know better, there is no necessity to spend my energy to change something because it will have no meaning. This is a way of thinking of people who voluntarily deprive their responsibility, and that's why they transfer to population. Citizens are different. Citizens are not just people with passport. Citizens are people with responsibility. Citizens think that, yes, we are ordinary people, but this is my business. We are ordinary people, but we can do extraordinary things. My efforts matter. And I think that we have to cultivate this citizenship approach. We need it. We need it in this current time. And let me finish on the positive note. It's also very important lessons learned. As I mentioned before, 12 years ago, I was coordinator of Euromaidan SOS and during the Revolution of Dignity, and we faced with entire authoritarian state machine. The paramilitary groups, Titushki, cooperated with prosecutors, with courts, with police. The former security service, former government, former president, the majority of parliament were against peaceful protests. They want liquidated, even physically. And in such circumstances, it was very easy to say, but what we can do? What we can do? We're just human beings. We can't contradict with the entire state machine. And such feeling as learned helplessness start to emerge. And in order to help people to overcome this learned helplessness, Ukrainian artists made a beautiful series of posters. They made a lot in additional to it, but I remember one poster very clearly. It was poster of a drop with a title, "We are drop in the ocean," which means, yes, we are not God, we are human beings, and our efforts are modest. And probably with my individual efforts, I can't change the situation, but without my individual efforts, nothing will be changed. And even more, together we are ocean. Together we succeed.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was all, folks. Flowers in the color of Ukrainian flag for Oleksandra. And flowers in UVT colors for Sabina.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Oleksandra, Matviichuk, and Sabina Iosub.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me say something in the end. It's my first time in Timișoara, and you are an amazing public. Yeah, I know it's my first time in Timișoara. You should know, but you are an amazing public. Thank you so much. Amazing audience, and it was an honor to have Oleksandra on this stage. And let's do something that it's done nowadays, a selfie together with you. So please stand up, all of you, and we will do a selfie from here to see all of you and to have a good photo with and for Oleksandra. More happier back then. Thank you so much.